A tidbit that came out yesterday is that the Sacramento Kings apparently reached out to the Chicago Bulls in attempts to trade for Zach LaVine, trying to find some direction for their roster. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Plus, we're going to talk about something that I think a segment of Bulls fans need to realize and come to the understanding. This team is not tanking. Despite them maybe being open to have deals, this team has no plans on tanking in the 2024-25 season. We're talking about all that plus more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into it for today, y'all. And so it came out yesterday from Ramona Shelburne that the Knicks inquired about Chicago's Zach LaVine, New Orleans' Brandon Ingram, and Brooklyn's Cam Thomas. Oh, and Washington's Kyle Kuzma leading into before the move of moving on from Mike Brown. They wanted to reportedly change some things. And after not being able to complete any of those deals, they decided that the path to go was to fire Mike Brown. Now, we've already talked a little bit about the firing of Mike Brown. We've even kind of talked about how, the Kings saw something that they weren't happy with. They moved on from a head coach that just won Coach of the Year in 2023, right? But unfortunately, when it comes down to it, every team has a different path, right? And I know that some Bulls fans, they keep looking at the Mike Brown firing and they're asking themselves, why, oh, why are we so attached to Billy Donovan? And that's just one of the places that we're at, right? Now, with that said, is that keep in mind, about 2 weeks ago, probably a little bit over 2 weeks ago, it was reported that the Bulls had no trade market for Zach LaVine, right? That his increased and his improved play so far this season really did not do much to increase his trade value. But over the last couple of weeks, we've heard that the Denver Nuggets had some serious issues. Seems like Zeke Najee's contract kept that from turning into a thing. And now that the Kings made a legitimate kind of inquiry about Zach LaVine, now the wording here is important. It said inquiry. It didn't say that an offer was officially made. It didn't say terms were even discussed. But an inquiry was made. It's probably exploratory call. Like, hey, what would it take to get Zach? Like, what would a Zach LaVine trade look like? Or, hey, we got these assets. What are you guys interested in these at all? And so it probably didn't go far, right? It doesn't seem like it even as much conversations were had as what was had with Denver on their offer. It is what it is, right? But I do think that this points towards that the tide may be turning if it has not turned all the way, right? As far as there are suitors for Zach LaVine. I think last year around this time, it was that the Bulls just couldn't find suitors, whether it be because of his injury, whether it be because, just doubt around him. He's done some things to help with that, right? And that's really all you can hope for. But the Bulls are I think are playing this right, and we'll get into this a little bit more in a minute because I think a few people got to come to some realizations there. But Zach LaVine garnering some interest. I mean, it's warranted. Like it should be. And I said this, at the beginning of this season, like a whole year was basically spent tearing down Zach LaVine, trying to make it seem like, oh, well, he's an empty calorie player. He's this, he's that. And the fact of the matter is that Zach LaVine has not really ever been on good teams. Yeah, he's had 3 years of being on good teams, and then that team, took a nosedive after the components that were all supposed to fit together. We lost a big component of that in Lonzo, and we never really quite found our footing after that. Like we were still a team that won some games, we were still a team that beat some good teams, but we never really had that same umph that the front office was hoping that team was going to have when they brought them all together, right? So now it leads to a point where you're looking at this, and it's great that interest is coming. It's great that, teams are starting to realize like Zach LaVine is a player that can help a lot of teams in the NBA. But, the question that a lot of Bulls fans are having, of course, now is that, well, if he can help us, why don't we just keep him? All right. And that's always the danger of a place that a team is moving off of a player that is productive is that, okay, what are you getting back? And then what does that mean for your direction? And I think now that we've heard like teams are interested in Vooch, the Suns reportedly interested in Vooch, the Warriors reportedly interested in Vooch, right? So there's some teams that have some interest in Nikola Vucevic as well, and that's great. That's great. But one thing that it seems like, and this kind of segues us into the next thing, I need Bulls fans to realize this team is not tanking, and it's not going to tank. I know we talked about this a little bit on yesterday's post-game show, but it keeps being a segment of Bulls fans that almost complain after every win. And not to say that I don't understand it, right? This is the thing that I've always said. There is a lot of thought process and good thought process that goes into why tanking would be the most beneficial to the Bulls, right? I've had videos on it. I've done it. I've talked about it. Hell, I've talked about the fact that if the Bulls stay the course of where they are now, it's more than likely going to end up in a handful of more years right in the middle of the pack, right? And it unfortunately, that's just the reality. It's not that, it comes down to, okay, well, are we just okay with it? You have no choice to be, right? And so I think that it comes down to the reality, right? It's coming to a reality and the awareness of that this team is not a team that's interested in taking, despite all the mental gymnastics that can be done to make it make sense for why taking should be the key, or why every win is a loss and vice versa, for all that stuff that the tanking fans that they want to see. Like, we cannot mentally force a front office. We don't have Jedi mind tricks to force a front office to do what we think or what fans think is best for the team. They have to pick and forge their direction. I said it on last night's stream as well. I'm somebody that once I just come to reality on things, right? I've said it. That's why you never hear me be a sell the team guy, because they're never selling the team. The Reinsdorfs are not selling the Chicago Bulls, right? So it's just that, when you have those fans in the segment that's like, oh my God, we got to sell the team. We got to put pressure. They got to sell they're not selling the team. It's not going to happen. And the Bulls aren't the type of franchise that, like, go look at some of the franchise. Like, people, I get it. The Bulls have been stuck in the middle for a long time. And, you even get some that say, well, we've been rebuilding since they haven't been rebuilding since Michael Jordan left, but we haven't won a title since Michael Jordan retired, right? And those are very different things. But, this team is in the place, right? And talking about coming to reality, this team is in the place where they want fair value for the pieces that they have. And I commend that to a certain degree, right? I do think that it could lead them to just not doing anything. But I do respect the fact that they don't want to just sell off pieces to just sell off pieces. And that's not where this team is. Now, they aren't necessarily looking for amazing value for their players, but they want fair value, right? Keep in mind, just 2 weeks ago, it was talked about as if Nikola Vucevic could only get you a couple of second-round picks back. And, the Bulls at that time had the value. No, we want a first back for a 20-10 guy who's putting up numbers. Even at this age, he's putting up all-star numbers. And that's what the problem isn't now that the Bulls hold their players at the proper value. The problem is that the Bulls undersold on some of their assets in the past, right? And you don't fix that now by just making a move to so that your fan base feels like, oh, they're finally getting on the right path, right? I'm glad that to a degree they're waking up and realizing now we gotta have a better value for the players that we have, or we have to, right? Because even if you do go into the direction of going younger or of trading your veteran pieces, you get into the point of asset allocation, right? And I hate to tell everybody this, I get it. This is a very deep draft. And that's why there's so much talk around this right now, is because of how deep this draft is. But this is not the deep draft in the point, and the Bulls aren't going to be bad enough to get a player that's going to single-handedly save this franchise. So therefore, if they do move on from Vooch, if they do move on from Zach, if they do move on from Torrey Craig, if they do move on from Lonzo Ball, if they do move on from Javon Carter, right? You want to get assets back that you're stacking at the very minimum. Now, they don't have to be picks that end up being top 10, top 5 picks, but you want to recoup some assets. The last thing that you want to do is a handoff Zach LaVine to a team that then is going to go on to win a title, and all you got out of that is a couple of second-round picks from a team that even their first-round pick would have been at the bottom of the first round, right? That's what it is about. So, no, this front office is not tanking. This front office isn't at the point where they're just going to make a trade to send out Vooch and Zach just so they can bottom out and keep their top 10 pick. They're not going to do that. Now, I've said it before. They can make moves that can increase their chances of keeping their pick. But to see, if you are expecting to see this team all of a sudden will and deal and do these things that, oh, we're sending off Zach LaVine for a heavily protected first and salary cap filler, we got that top 10 pick. That's not what this front office is going to do. And I'm not saying that you're crazy for desiring that. I'm not saying that you're crazy for wanting that. I'm not saying that you're crazy or wrong for wanting to see this team or the ownership sell the team. But like I said, my job here isn't just to push a narrative. It isn't just to push what I would want or what fans or the overall fan base. It's to have a legitimate, intelligent conversation over the realities of what's going on here. And that is the reality of the situation that we find ourselves in. AK and Eversley are not going to outwardly tank this team. They're not. It's not happening. It's just not happening. Players and coaches aren't tanking. They're going to try to compete for everything. So if you want to tank, it comes down to the front office putting the roster in such a place that it just is not going to win a lot of games. Now, with that said, I do still think that this Bulls team is still going to win about 30 to 35 games. That's the reality of it. Now, if they do move Zach LaVine, that could change that drastically. Depends on where and when you do it. But that's just where we are, right? And I don't say that to crap on anybody on your thoughts. Like, listen, I would love to be able to say that the Bulls are going to draft Ace Bailey. I would love to be able to say the Bulls are going to draft Dylan Harper. I would love to be able to say that the Bulls are going to draft Igor. I would love to be able to say these things. But the fact of the matter is, you gotta at some point just come to the realization. Don't be bloggable, right? Don't be the outlet that just keeps pushing and a narrative over something that just is not going to happen, right? At that point, you're just fighting against the current, right? You're fighting a battle upstream, and you don't control the stream, nor do you control the raft that you're on trying to get through that stream, right? Us as fans, and I've said this before, and I've seen it, and not to say that I can rally the fan base or anything like that, because people are gonna feel the way that they feel about their teams, and you're valid for feeling that way, right? But I've said this before, it's none of us, right? They're not one of your fellow Bulls fans are the reason why the team is in the state that they are. Nobody that you're talking to in the comments of any YouTube videos is the reason why the Bulls are where the franchise is where it is. It's just not. And so while we have varying different opinions because we're not a monolith as a fan base, it just comes down to that simple realization. The Bulls are not tanking. Now, are they a good basketball team? No. I still hold that out. Like, they're a solid basketball team. They're a competitive basketball team as far as the sense that there are going to be some games where you watch this team, you watch the fight in this team, you watch the resolve of this team, and you're going to sit there and say, why the hell are we only a half a game from being out of the play-in and in the bottom 5 teams in the Eastern Conference? Like, why is that? Why are we that close to that, considering how this team does fight and compete at times? And it just comes down to consistency in both coaching, consistency in performance from some of the players, consistency in the front office executing things that help this team improve. The Bulls have not made a move that has improved the team in years. And that's not a knock to like Josh Giddey or Jalen Smith or anything. Fine acquisitions, right? But those were more so kept the status quo. We gave up Alex Caruso for Josh Giddey. Very different players that bring a very different skill set, but it didn't up the current ceiling. Now, as Josh Giddey improves, it could, right, for sure. Jalen Smith was there to replace Andre Drummond. Again, a very different player, but when you look at the numbers, similar production, right? And so the Bulls have made these moves that have basically kept the status quo. Now, you did draft Modest Vucevic. You sent out DeMar DeRozan. Modest Vucevic, another young player at 20 years old that, again, just a couple. Hey, if he hits that development at some point, he hits that ceiling, that does change the direction for the Bulls. But as far as right now, I mean, Modest is still trying to find his way in this league. He's still trying to find a consistency and a role in this league that he has not found at all yet, right? And that's partially because of coaching, partially because of just him, the nature of being a rookie and still having a lot that he needs to improve on. But that's where this team is, right? And that is my job here. That is the job that I take on here, is to talk about the realities of it. I don't always like the things that I tell you guys aren't always like what I would want to see the team do. It's just me saying this is the route that I see and reading the tea leaves, and this is what is being signaled by this front office. All right? That's it. I would love this front office to go out and make a swing for it, right? I would love this front office to, even if it comes down to using this pick in this draft to acquire, like shit, use it to acquire somebody that is out there. Like, cool, if you're going to do this, we're going to actually be able to win, but then again, we don't have the assets, and that's what the overall negative of this front office is we sit in a place where our performance is in the middle of the pack, but our assets are in the middle of the pack as well. So we don't have the type of assets to take a big swing. Our first round pick is top 10 protected this year. Top 8 protected the next 2 years. So we can't even move those two until this pick this year conveys. So that means that's 2 first round picks we can't even use at this trade deadline if we wanted to because of the way that the protection on the Spurs pick works out. So we don't have the assets. We don't have the contracts either if we want to make a move that improves us while still keeping some of the best pieces around on our team. That's the place that this front office is. And I've said it before, as long as AK and Eversley are running this team, we are not going to tank. It's just not going to happen. It's not what AK's done. It's not how he learned as a GM. It's not what he did in the franchise that he came from. So don't expect it. Now, like I said, I can understand you guys wanting it. But like I said before, at some point, we got to come to the realization and stop just keep trying to push something that they're telling us that they aren't going to do. They aren't going to do. They control the narrative. They control the decisions. They control the path. They control all of that. So us as fans, all we can do is talk about what we want, talk about the reality, and then deal with it as best we can or stop being fans. That's never going to happen for me. I'm going to be a Bulls fan to the day I die, but that's the place that we're in. And that's the reality of the situation. And yeah, in some ways that it sucks. It absolutely sucks. But like I said, this team is not in a place where they're trying to sell off assets just to sell them off. They're in a place where if they can get fair value, they'll get fair value. And we'll see where that ends up leaving us. But with that said, let's go ahead, man. Let's move into the next one, man. We got one voicemail that I want to play. This one is from Reginald.
Hey, this is Reginald from Columbus, Georgia. Just calling to, talk about the last update you did about all the trades the trade that went down with Dulo and Jordan Finney-Smith. And I agree with you. Vooch is worth the first round pick. Any team that's going to be calling them are going to be championship contenders. Teams that are in the top 8. And while most of those so-called experts were like, oh, you'll be lucky to get a second round pick for Vooch. Like, he's a 2010 guy. You're like, even though he only has like a year and a half left on his deal, he's still worth the first round pick. He's still one of at least top 12 centers in the game. So if the Bulls can't get a first round pick for him this year, once again, there's no rush. There's not going to be any game-changing deal that makes the Bulls into a championship contender. So if they need to wait until the off-season to move them, so be it. Same with Zach LaVine. While I agree that the Denver deal is, intriguing, but if you're not getting at least one unprotected first-round pick for him, I would just tell teams not to waste your time calling. And I asked for the other Bulls who are on the trade block, guys like Torrey Craig. Yes, he's worth the second rounder. Last year I would have said multiple second rounders, but he hasn't been playing a lot, so he can't really showcase what he can do. Lonzo Ball's worth multiple second rounders. Yes, I know he's hurt, but there aren't a whole lot of point guards that can do what he can do. If there was, the Bulls would have gone after him instead of Lonzo. But if I could, I'd probably try to get seconds for him. One of them unprotected. And lastly, maybe a guy like DHT. Like you said, when I comment on this, DHT is only good in some situation where the team gives him the ball and let him do what he do. So a top-heavy team who needs a seventh man, that second guy to come off the bench for him and put up points is a good fit for him. Lastly, on Josh Giddey, I hope he continues to play solid defense. I hope he continues to improve. That's the only way he's going to get, that long-term big contract his agent wants him to get. I'm sure he wants to get too. But what's your opinion? Thanks.
Reginald, listen, I do think that it points towards something as far as the value out on the trade market. I think you hit the nail on the head there. These players have value. And, that's kind of what I was getting to in my last rant. And this front office is going to try to get that value for these players. Yeah, you should not. Imagine had the Bulls settled for 2 second-round picks for Nikola Vucevic when that was the initial rumor, right? And then look at the way that Vooch has gone on. He's had some downs. Make no mistake about it. It hasn't been perfect. The defense is still a liability there. But then imagine if you got 2 second-round picks for Nikola Vucevic, and then you end up hearing Dorian Finney-Smith went for 3 second-round picks, right? Or maybe you could say also this is a conversation that could be said that the Bulls could have negatively set the market at that point in time. But then again, when have the Bulls ever set a market? right? So there's that part. Like Zach LaVine, absolutely hold out for a first-round pick, and I say unprotected. I say unless they want to like top 5 protected because it's in like 2030 and their players aren't under contract into there, maybe. But even then, I'm at this point of saying Zach LaVine deserves an unprotected first-round pick, mainly because the teams that would be making a move for Zach are theoretically competitors are contenders for a title. So yeah, you better get an unprotected first-round pick if you're going to move on from him. Lonzo Ball, I would love if Lonzo was fully healthy, or even had a full season of being fully healthy by the time we're having this conversation, he should net back more than Dorian Finney-Smith. Now, because he is in the first year back of coming back from an injury, he already missed a double-digit game time span with a new injury. It's going to be a little bit hard to get that, but again, you should hold out the most value possible for Lonzo Ball. Torrey Craig is a veteran piece. We saw what he did last night, and that's what he can do as a veteran. You hold out value, right? If you can get 2 seconds, great, right? That's what this front office is telling us. That's what they're doing, and I don't think it's a problem with that. Now, as far as Josh Giddey's defense, here's the thing. Josh Giddey had another sub-100 defensive rating game yesterday. Keep in mind, the lower numbers, the better for defensive rating. His defensive rating was 97 last night against the Charlotte Hornets. Now, I know some people are going to look at that and say, well, Hayes, we're facing off against a team without LaMelo, without Brandon Miller, so he better goddamn well have a good defensive rating. Yeah, but if he didn't have a good defense and his defense was trash, people would be calling that out. So, yeah, we're going to acknowledge it. Hopefully, this is looking like it's becoming a trend for Josh Giddey. He is now 5 games in a row of a defensive rating of 103 or better. Keep in mind, 110 is league average. Anything below that, you're technically above average. So, hey, listen, shout out to Josh Giddey. I said it before. He, this season, can have more sub-100, let's say sub-108, defensive rating games in just this season than he had his whole career in OKC. Yeah, and we'll see how that pans out for Josh Giddey and for this Bulls team. But guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bulls Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. BullsCentralPod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number 1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that's thanks to you, lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.